Chapter 5. The Storm. I hung up the phone and turned off the TV, my scalp tingling like the static inside the blackened television. I felt as restless as the wind picking up in the trees. Seeing her on the screen was like being with her in a dream, and wanting the dream to last for hours. I wondered where the interview had come from, and if there was more footage. I wished I could remember her words exactly. I looked at the photo on the bookshelf and picked it up, holding it close. It was probably taken moments before a dissection. Mom was wearing white coveralls like a painter, and a headlamp glowed like a star in the center of her forehead. In the dark, she knelt beside a giant shark that had spilled out of the ocean and beached itself in the sand. The shark's teeth were as white as her miner's light. Her face was 4 feet away from the shark's open jaws, and her expression was completely calm, as if she were posing for a family photo with Dad and me. This made sense, seeing that the shark was dead, and therefore unable to raise its head and snap her in half. It was a safe time for collecting data, but that was the thing about my mom. She would have collected data 4 feet away from a live shark. There was something shiny in her pocket. I moved the photo closer to my face, like an old lady reading a menu. The object looked like a silver pen, clipped to her pocket cuff. I wondered if it was a roller ball or a ballpoint. Balls were smoother to draw with, and I wondered how she could use a pen if her hands were covered in fish guts. I wondered what she wrote and if she made sketches during the dissection. She wasn't much of an artist, but I was. I dialed the phone. "Fred," I said into the receiver, "let's work on the field guide." "Okay," he said. "I want to sketch the shark," I said. "At the wharf?" he asked. "Yeah." "I'll meet you outside," he said. I walked across the creaky floors to look out the window. In the light of the street lamp, the leaves were bending upside down like it was going to rain. Mr. Patterson was on his porch listening to the radios. In the kitchen, I scanned the counter for my house key. I stuffed a sketch pad into my backpack and walked across the street. "Any news about the shark?" I asked. "Police are keeping watch," Mr. Patterson said. "What are they waiting for?" I asked. "Who knows? It's positively gothic." "Any news about Dad?" Mr. Patterson shook his head and pointed to the police scanner, still at the harbor. Fred came out his front door. "Fred," I yelled, "over here." Fred changed courses and walked next door to Mr. Patterson's. "The shark's still there," I said to Fred, zipping my pack. He raised his eyebrows. "Let's go," I said. He nodded. Through the darkness, we rode our bikes into the wind, down Beach Street, passing Front Beach and the old cemetery. The waves beat down on the sand louder at night, breaking even stronger than usual. At the Captain's Bounty Motor Inn, there were no guests on the balconies. We rounded the bend onto Main Street, past the bookstore, and coasted down the hill. The temperature had dropped. I regretted not packing a sweatshirt. "It's definitely gonna rain," Fred said. "I'll be quick," I said. Our tires kicked up gravel that nicked my legs as we approached T-Wharf, and right away I saw the shark, still hanging over the water, like a torture victim. There was a Rockport police squad car a stone's throw from the shark. I rode up to the window and peeked inside. "Officer Pirelli," I yelled. He was reading the newspaper by flashlight. "Lucy, what are you doing here? It's late," he said. "Hi, Fred." "You mind if we have a look at the shark?" I said. "Go ahead. Then I'll give you guys a ride home. Storm's coming in." I dropped the bike in the gravel and walked over to the shark. There was a tremendous fishy odor, like 1,000 tuna cans had been opened, and a sizable pool had formed on the ground below its mouth. Blood, seawater, and mysterious shark fluids. Floodlights on the dock lit the corpse. I looked up at the shark's face, if that's what it was called. A few of its teeth jutted out in crooked directions. The shark's mouthy expression and big black eyes looked human, as if it might strike up a conversation. "Mind if I eat your dad?" The shark was anything but human. It was gigantic. There was a long tail and fins. It breathed underwater. I wasn't even sure it had bones. The longer I stared at the eye, the more I thought it was really blue. Scars marked the snout, but one scar stood out from the rest. The letter M with loopy humps like cursive. Fred pointed to a small chunk missing from the dorsal fin. "What happened there?" he asked. "Don't know," I said, pulling my backpack over my shoulder. "Fight?" I unzipped the bag and pulled out a pencil and the sketch pad. Freaky, isn't it? Officer Pirelli said through the cruiser window. Yup, I said. Sookie decided what he's going to do with it yet? Tomorrow he'll cut it down and dispose of it. I think he's out celebrating tonight. Are you guarding it until then? Fred asked. Yep. The captain's worried some weirdo's trying to do something to it, but Sookie promised me a cooler full of lobsters if I stay here all night. You ready to go? No, I said. I just need a few minutes. Fred crouched in front of me, and I leaned into the sketch pad on his back. I drew the strange arc of the shark's body in a single line, like a big nose on the page, just for shape. I added the bands around the body and drew in the ropes that connected the shark to the winch, drawing the basic structure of the contorted shark to show how it was possible for something so large to be suspended in midair. What is she doing? Officer Pirelli asked. Drawing the shark, Fred yelled over his shoulder. Why? She's an artist, said Fred. I smiled, filling in the fleshy bulges at the sides of the bands and adding fins and teeth. I couldn't be too precious with the details once Fred's knees started shaking. Just one more minute, I said to him. Okay, he said. The drawing looked a little cartoonish, but I felt like I had built the architecture of the scene. I could try to fill in the details later. We usually included one drawing of each animal in the field guide. I wondered whether I would record the contorted fish out of water version of the shark, or if I should eventually draw something that showed the shark in a more natural position for the guide. All of the animals I had drawn before were alive. I scratched Fred's head to signal that I was finished. Thanks, I said. No problem, he said, turning around to get a look at the drawing. Looks just like it. I moved closer to the shark to get a better look at the ridges on the serrated teeth. Leaning the sketch pad on my left forearm to make a quick sketch of the steak knife points, to the left of the shark drawing, the first raindrop hit the page. I finished up the teeth and a quick sketch of the eye before the drop started coming quickly. Get in the car, guys, said Officer Pirelli, popping the trunk of the cruiser. I zipped up my backpack just as the rain started pelting us. You could fit like 4 bodies in there, I said, as Officer Pirelli hefted my bike into the trunk. He gave me a look. It was a joke, I said. As we pulled away, I looked out the window at the shark. The rain had picked up and was pelting the snout. The nasty puddle beneath it was growing. There were 3 things on my mind, tangled up like necklaces in a jewelry box. My mom looking me in the eye, the shark that was hanging in the rain, and the empty house I was returning to. None of these felt like problems I could solve. I hugged my backpack to my chest and looked at the rain sheeting on the window. She said she wasn't afraid to swim with them, I said. What? Fred asked, turning to me from looking out his side of the cruiser. My mom, I said. She wasn't afraid to swim with sharks. Yeah, I always thought she was kind of crazy, he said. Me too, I said, relieved that Fred felt the same way. But they left her alone. Maybe she knew how to blend in. Probably, he said. Shook you up when you saw her on TV. What do you mean? I asked, knowing exactly what he meant. He dropped the phone, he said. Are you okay? I could see Officer Pirelli's eyes looking at me in the rearview mirror. It took me off guard, I'd said. I've been thinking about her today because of the shark. When I saw her on TV, it was like she'd read my mind. Fred breathed out through his mouth and looked me in the eye. He didn't know what to say, but he put his hand against the side of my leg, and we just rode like that until the cruiser stopped on the narrow street between our houses. Stay in tonight, said Officer Pirelli as he popped the trunk, rain bouncing off the carpet inside. Go watch TV. Sure, I said. Thanks for the ride. The wind caught the heavy door and it slammed shut behind me. Fred and I got soaked pulling the bikes out of the trunk. I was worried about my sketch pad getting wet through the canvas backpack. Fred closed the trunk and Officer Pirelli rolled down to the end of Smith Street, making a right towards town again. I'll see you tomorrow, I yelled to Fred over the loud rain as we stood on my side of the road. A narrow river of water ran down the driveway onto Smith Street. You want to watch the rest of the game at my house, he said. I shook my head. It'll be a rain out or something. I'll be fine. Call you in the morning, he said. Don't let your drawings get wet. I know. I ran down the driveway. Dad's car wasn't in the garage. I leaned my bike against the lawnmower and let myself into the house.